You've probably felt it, that strange emptiness when you scroll through endless posts, headlines, and arguments online. Everyone seems to be shouting, yet no one is really saying anything. Opinions fly faster than facts, and outrage spreads quicker than understanding. And somewhere deep down you sense it. The world is louder than ever, but it isn't wiser. Think about the last time you tried to share an honest thought that didn't fit with the crowd. Maybe you hesitated, maybe you held back, or maybe you spoke up and were immediately drowned out by noise. That sinking feeling, that what you're saying doesn't matter, or worse, that you're wrong for even thinking it. That's what happens when critical thinking begins to disappear. This isn't just happening to other people. It's happening to all of us, slowly, subtly, without us even noticing. Because critical thinking doesn't vanish overnight. It erodes. Piece by piece, reason gets replaced with convenience, reflection gets replaced with noise, and wisdom gets buried under the weight of collective stupidity. But here's why you should stay with me. What we're about to uncover isn't just theory, it's a mirror. These 7 reasons aren't abstract ideas, they're experiences you've already lived, choices you've already made, and forces that shape the way you think every single day. And if you stay until the very end, you'll see the most dangerous reason of all, the one that may change how you look at society forever. The comfort of convenience. We live in an age where everything is just a click away. Answers, entertainment, even opinions, all neatly packaged and ready for us to consume. On the surface, it feels like progress. Why wrestle with a question when Google can give you an instant answer? Why reflect on an idea when a stranger on social media has already shouted their version of the truth? But here's the trap. Convenience kills curiosity. When everything comes too easily, we stop searching, we stop asking, we stop thinking. The philosopher Soren Kierkegaard once wrote, "People demand freedom of speech as a compensation for the freedom of thought which they seldom use." And that's exactly what's happening today. We celebrate how connected we are, yet most of us rarely pause to ask whether we truly understand the things we're repeating. Think about how often we accept the first answer we see. You're watching the news and one headline flashes across the screen. You nod, maybe even share it, without questioning the source. Or you overhear a friend's opinion and suddenly it becomes your own. Convenience feels safe. It saves us time, but it also makes us passive, and passive minds are easy to control. Let me ask you, when was the last time you really sat with a difficult question? Not just for a few minutes, but long enough to feel the discomfort of not knowing. Long enough to form your own conclusion instead of relying on someone else's. If you're struggling to remember, you're not alone. That's the cost of a culture addicted to convenience. The irony is that we confuse this passivity for intelligence. Because we can access information instantly, we feel informed. But knowledge without reflection is like food that never gets digested. It passes through without nourishing us. And here's the emotional truth. Many of us feel it. That restlessness, that quiet guilt that maybe we're skimming through life instead of really living it. We read headlines but never the full story. We skim quotes but never the book. We scroll endlessly, mistaking movement for progress, when in reality, we're standing still. This is the first reason critical thinking is disappearing. We've chosen convenience over curiosity. And while convenience makes life easier, it also makes us weaker. Because wisdom doesn't come instantly. It comes slowly, painfully, through effort, reflection, and struggle. Without that, we trade freedom of thought for the comfort of someone else doing the thinking for us. Stay with me, because the next reason will hit even closer to home. It's not just about convenience. It's about how the very platforms we use every day are designed to drown out our ability to think at all. The noise of social media. Step into any social platform today, and it feels less like a marketplace of ideas and more like a shouting contest. Opinions come at you from every angle, memes, half-truths, hot takes, and outrage packaged into 30-second clips. Everyone is speaking, but almost no one is listening. And the result? Noise. Endless, overwhelming noise. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche once warned, "Madness is rare in individuals, but in groups, parties, nations, and ages, it is the rule." What he meant is this: when crowds gather, thinking tends to disappear. And isn't that exactly what social media looks like? Billions of voices competing for attention, not truth. But here's the deeper problem. Noise drowns reflection. When your feed refreshes every second, you don't have time to sit with a single idea before the next one appears. Outrage is rewarded, not insight. Clever insults go viral faster than thoughtful arguments. The algorithm isn't built to promote wisdom. It's built to keep you scrolling. And slowly, without noticing, we adapt. Have you ever found yourself nodding along with something online just because it was loud, shared often, or came from someone popular? Maybe you didn't fully agree. Maybe you didn't even fully understand. But in the chaos of so many voices, it felt safer to just go along. That's how noise wins. It wears you down until silence feels like the only option, or conformity feels like survival. And there's something emotional here too. Deep down, many of us crave to be heard. Social media promises that. But the cost of being heard in a noisy world is that we often sacrifice depth for attention. We post the simplified version, the exaggerated version, the version that will get likes. And the more we do it, the further we drift from authentic thinking. It's exhausting, isn't it? To be constantly surrounded by words, yet feel starved for meaning. To hear everyone talking, but sense that no one is really saying anything. That exhaustion is the symptom of collective stupidity, because when everyone is trying to win the argument, no one is asking the right questions. And maybe you felt this personally. After hours of scrolling, you put your phone down feeling more anxious, more irritated, and somehow less sure of what you actually believe. That's not just distraction. That's the erosion of thought. This is the second reason critical thinking is disappearing. In a world flooded with noise, reflection has no space to breathe. Social media doesn't kill thought with silence. It kills it with too many voices, all screaming at once. Stay with me, because the next reason is even more personal. It takes us back to where our thinking first began, our classrooms. And you'll see why the way we were taught might be the very reason wisdom is dying today. Education that teaches memorization, not thinking. Think back to your school days. Do you remember the moments that shaped you? Chances are, most of them weren't about discovery or deep reflection. They were about tests, about memorizing facts, formulas, and dates, just long enough to pass an exam. You were rewarded not for asking questions, but for repeating the right answers. The system didn't teach us how to think. It taught us how to obey. We were conditioned to believe that success meant coloring inside the lines, giving the teacher what they wanted, and never challenging the rules. And while that structure may keep classrooms orderly, it does little to nurture independent thought. The philosopher Jiddu Krishnamurti once said, "It is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society." If education only prepares us to fit into a broken system, then maybe the system isn't education at all. It's indoctrination. Maybe you felt this as a child. You asked, "Why?" too many times, only to be told to stop. You raised a hand with an unpopular opinion, only to be laughed at. You wanted to create, to challenge, to imagine. But the system told you that wasn't valuable. What mattered was memorization, repetition, and conformity. And here's the damage. When children grow up being rewarded for repeating instead of questioning, they carry that habit into adulthood. They learn not to think, but to wait for someone else to tell them what to think. And in a world already drowning in noise, that habit becomes deadly. Because collective stupidity isn't born from ignorance. It's born from people who've been trained to never question authority. But let's pause here. If this feels familiar, if you've ever felt that your curiosity was punished instead of encouraged, you're not alone. In fact, I'd like to hear from you. Drop a comment sharing one memory of when you were silenced, overlooked, or discouraged for thinking differently. Your story might remind someone else that they aren't crazy for feeling the same way. Because here's the truth. Real wisdom doesn't come from memorizing what others tell you. It comes from daring to ask questions others are too afraid to ask. And when we stop encouraging that, wisdom withers. This is the third reason critical thinking is disappearing. We were never really taught to think in the first place. We were taught to perform, to pass, to repeat. And when an entire society grows up this way, it's no surprise that collective stupidity rises to take its place. Stay with me, because in the next part, we'll uncover something even deeper, the fear of standing alone, and why so many of us choose silence, even when our hearts are screaming that something is wrong. Fear of standing alone. Have you ever been in a room where everyone agreed on something, but deep down you knew it wasn't right? Maybe it was a workplace decision, a group of friends gossiping, or even a family tradition you didn't believe in. Your gut told you to speak up, but your mouth stayed shut. Why? Because standing alone feels terrifying. Humans are wired for belonging. From childhood, we're taught that fitting in means safety, and being different means danger. The philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer once said, "We forfeit 3/4 of ourselves in order to be like other people." And isn't that exactly what happens? To avoid isolation, we sacrifice parts of who we are. The fear of standing alone doesn't just silence us, it rewrites us. We convince ourselves that maybe the crowd is right, maybe our doubts are wrong, maybe staying quiet is easier than risking rejection. And little by little, critical thinking is traded for conformity. Think about social media again. How often do you see a flood of comments all saying the same thing? Even if you disagree, even if something feels off, you scroll past instead of speaking up. Because in the digital crowd, disagreement feels dangerous. One post can turn into thousands of voices against you. Or picture a meeting at work. Everyone nods at the boss's idea, even though it's flawed. You want to raise your hand, but you don't. Later, when the plan fails, you think, why didn't I say something? That's the cost of silence, not just personal regret, but collective failure. This fear is powerful because it plays on our deepest need, connection. Nobody wants to be the outsider, the one who challenges, the one who risks being mocked. But without people willing to stand alone, truth never rises. Here's the irony. History remembers those who stood apart, not those who blended in. Socrates, Galileo, Rosa Parks, none of them were safe in their time. But their courage to stand against the crowd is what opened the path for wisdom. Now ask yourself, where in your own life are you staying silent to belong? Maybe it's at work, maybe in friendships, maybe even within yourself. The first step to reclaiming critical thought is noticing those moments, because once you see how fear shapes your silence, you can begin to break it. This is the fourth reason critical thinking is disappearing. The world has trained us to believe that belonging is safer than truth. And when too many people choose silence, stupidity becomes the voice of the crowd. Stay with me, because in the next reason we'll dive into something even more subtle. How the endless pull of entertainment keeps us distracted, comfortable, and too numb to notice that wisdom is slipping away. The addiction to entertainment. It's late at night. You tell yourself you'll only watch one more episode, one more video, one more scroll. Hours later, the sun is creeping up and you feel drained, but somehow you can't stop. Sound familiar? You're not alone. Entertainment has become our escape, our comfort, and for many, our addiction. Now, there's nothing wrong with enjoying a show, a game, or a funny clip, but here's the danger. When entertainment becomes endless, reflection disappears. The philosopher Aldous Huxley once warned, "The people will come to love their oppression, to adore the technologies that undo their capacities to think." He wasn't exaggerating. He saw it coming. Today we live in Huxley's world. Instead of being silenced by force, we're distracted by choice. Endless entertainment lulls us into passivity. It keeps us comfortable, but numb. We don't ask the hard questions, because the next distraction is just one tap away. Think about how much time is stolen this way. How many evenings vanish into endless scrolling? How many conversations never happen because everyone at the table is staring at a screen? How many thoughts die before they're even born because we fill every quiet moment with noise? And it's not just about time, it's about what we lose in the process. Silence used to be the space where wisdom grew. Walks, books, stillness, even boredom. These were the places where the mind wrestled with itself and found clarity. Now, silence feels unbearable. We run from it, desperate for the next distraction, terrified of being alone with our own thoughts. Here's the emotional truth. Sometimes, deep down, we know we're distracting ourselves from the things that hurt. We avoid reflection because we're scared of what we might find, and entertainment offers the perfect escape. But in avoiding discomfort, we also avoid growth. Ask yourself, when was the last time you allowed yourself to be bored? To sit in silence without reaching for your phone? To finish a day and realize you thought more than you consumed? For most of us, it's been a long time, and that's no accident. Our culture profits from our distraction. The less we think, the more we consume. This is the fifth reason critical thinking is disappearing. We've traded reflection for distraction. And while entertainment can make us laugh or help us escape for a moment, it also keeps us numb, passive, and easy to control. Stay with me, because the next reason is even more dangerous. It's about how we've stopped trusting ourselves and started outsourcing our opinions to those in power, whether they deserve that power or not. Authority. Overthinking. Have you ever repeated something just because someone important said it? Maybe it was a news anchor, a politician, a teacher, or even a social media influencer. You didn't fully understand it, but it sounded smart, and people respected them, so you trusted it. That's the subtle danger of authority. It makes us stop thinking for ourselves. The philosopher Immanuel Kant once wrote, "Enlightenment is man's emergence from his self-imposed immaturity." By immaturity, he meant the habit of letting others think for us. And he was right. Most people don't question authority, not because they can't, but because they won't. It feels easier to trust a figurehead than to wrestle with complex ideas ourselves. Think about how this shows up in daily life. A doctor says something, so we don't ask questions, even if we don't understand. A boss makes a decision, so we nod along, even when it feels wrong. A viral influencer declares a truth, and suddenly it's repeated everywhere, whether it's accurate or not. We've replaced reflection with repetition. And here's the emotional truth. Sometimes, authority feels safe. Life is overwhelming, and it feels comforting to believe that someone else has the answers. But the cost of that comfort is that we hand over our critical thinking. Slowly, we begin to mistake obedience for wisdom. The irony is that history shows us how dangerous blind trust can be. Wars have been started, atrocities committed, and entire generations misled. Not because ordinary people were evil, but because they surrendered their thinking to authority. When enough people obey without question, collective stupidity doesn't just rise, it becomes unstoppable. Maybe you felt this in your own life. You stayed quiet in a meeting because you didn't want to challenge your boss. You went along with a decision in your family, even though it felt wrong. You repeated something online because everyone else seemed to agree. In those moments, it wasn't ignorance holding you back. It was the fear of challenging authority. But here's the thing. Authority isn't always wrong. The problem is when we stop questioning altogether. True wisdom doesn't reject authority. It engages with it, tests it, and filters it through personal reflection. Without that, we become echo chambers for other people's ideas. This is the sixth reason critical thinking is disappearing. We've confused following authority with thinking. And in a world that rewards obedience, it takes courage to pause, reflect, and ask, but is this true? Stay with me, because the final reason may be the hardest to face. It isn't about social media, entertainment, or authority. It's about something deeper, something within ourselves, our fear of responsibility. And when you hear it, you may realize why so many of us are choosing collective stupidity over true wisdom. Fear of responsibility. At the heart of it all, there's one truth most people don't want to face. Thinking deeply comes with responsibility, and responsibility is heavy. The philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre once wrote, "Man is condemned to be free, because once thrown into the world, he is responsible for everything he does." That freedom sounds liberating, but it terrifies most of us. Because real thinking means you can no longer hide behind excuses. You can no longer say, I was just following orders, or that's what everyone else believes. Critical thinking makes you responsible for your own choices. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Many people don't want that. It's easier to live in collective stupidity, to follow the crowd, to drown in entertainment, to parrot authority. Because the moment you start thinking for yourself, you also have to live with the consequences of being different. Think about it. When was the last time you made a decision that went against the group? How much courage did it take? How much fear did you feel? That fear is why most people don't step out of line. Responsibility is scary because it means you're no longer protected by the safety of the crowd. But here's the paradox. The very thing we fear, responsibility, is also the path to freedom. When you dare to think for yourself, you stop being controlled by algorithms, leaders, or the noise of the masses. You begin to reclaim your mind, piece by piece. And that reclamation isn't just freedom, it's wisdom. This is the seventh and final reason critical thinking is disappearing. Because we'd rather surrender our responsibility than face the discomfort of freedom. And yet, if you're watching this, something in you refuses to surrender. Something in you still longs for clarity, for truth, for the strength to think differently. So I'll leave you with this. Collective stupidity only grows when individuals give up their courage. But the moment you choose responsibility, the moment you choose to think, you chip away at the illusion. And that choice, however small, can change everything. If any of these reasons struck you, share your thoughts below. Not just for me, but for the community of people who need to know they're not alone in this. Because wisdom isn't born in silence. It's born when voices like yours dare to rise.